So we've already looked at congruent triangles and them telling us a congruent statement and us determining what parts of those triangles would be congruent. So the sides and the angles. Now we're going to go the opposite direction. So they're going to give us two triangles and they're going to ask us to decide if they are congruent or not. The way we're going to do that is with these congruent postulates. A postulate is just a fancy way of saying somewhere along the way someone proved that these things work that make a triangle congruent. So if we look at them, we have 5 different ways to prove that triangles are congruent. The first is side, 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 and we abbreviate that with 3 S's, so SSS. And that says that 3 pairs of congruent sides make my triangle congruent. So if I mark my pictures, each side has a congruent piece with the other triangle, and if that is the case, we have side, side, side. Side angle side is when we have 2 sides and an included angle. So if you see that angle is sandwiched in between our 2 congruent sides. Again, it matches up with both of our triangles, so that would be side angle side. We also have angle side angle. So in this case, we have 2 angles with an included side. So that's sandwich side. The side is in between my 2 angles, and each of my angles is congruent to another on the other triangle. Our fourth is angle angle side. And with this one, we have 2 sides or 2 angles and a side opposite. So our side is not sandwiched in between. So that's the difference between angle side angle and angle angle side. And if you look, it's sort of you go around as a clock. So we're doing angle, angle, and then our side for angle, angle, side. But when we have the previous one, if I'm saying it in the order, it would be angle, side, angle. Our very last way is hypotenuse leg. Hypotenuse leg is very specific to our right triangles. So the hypotenuse in any leg of a right triangle being congruent to a leg and hypotenuse for another triangle makes those triangles congruent. When we are doing these proofs, we have some things that we need to keep in mind, and these are things that we've already looked at in some other proofs. There are some things that we've already looked at in different units with our angles, but this is just as a little bit of a reminder. So reasons that our sides could be congruent are that they tell us that it's given. If we have the definition of a midpoint creates 2 congruent sides, and that's really important for us to remember. And then our reflexive property. So that's saying that something is congruent to itself. So one angle is equal to itself, or a side is equal to itself. Our angles that are congruent, again, they can tell us that it's given. We can have vertical angles. Remember, vertical angles are angles that are across from each other. And then we have all of our different types of angles that we looked at when we were looking at parallel lines and a transversal. So we have our alternate interior angles, our alternate exterior angles, corresponding angles, definition of angle bisector. That's one that wasn't in our parallel lines unit, but that is one that we have talked about before. So when I have an angle and I have an angle bisector, it's cutting that angle in 2 complete halves. So those 2 angles would be congruent. The other thing that we are going to look at with this unit is called the CPCTC. Again, it's just a shorthand. What that means is that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So that's what we looked at last class. So if we have triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, then we can say all of these congruencies based off of our picture. So remember, it's really important and really helpful to draw our pictures and then mark it as we go. You can also look based off of the lettering with our statement. So AB is congruent to DE. We can see that in the picture and just based off of our statement. We have AC congruent to DF and BC congruent to EF, and then again, those angles match up. So when we're doing our proofs, we are going to keep all of these reasons in mind, but we are really going to focus in on these 5 different types of congruent proofs. So those are the things that we're going to look at with those postulates.